and good day, good afternoon, good evening, depending on when you're watching this. Hello, everyone. So glad that you were able to join me on today. So, y'all, we're going to be talking about the invisible work. The invisible work that creates low performers. And I'm really excited about this topic. This is something that essentially we've been kind of getting into all year long. And last year we talked a little bit about how low performers compare and use that as a essentially as a standard base to figure out what's going on. So we're going to get a little bit deeper into that. But before we do, for those of you who do not know who I am, my name is Lepore Lindsay, and I go live every single Sunday at 5:30 Central, and we're talking about all things that are workplace value and engagement. And when we talk about workplace value, there are two different things here that I'll briefly summarize. Number one is each and every person has self-worth. Each and every person has value. The workplace value is something that is a matter of how does this fit into the workplace? How does this come across as being useful and beneficial, your skills and your abilities? So we're not debating the self-worth portion. Every single person has value and worth. We are talking about how do we utilize those skills. And as of late, we've been talking about it more so from a systems lens or an organizational lens. And that is about how does each person play a role and ensuring that the contributions are interpreted as being valuable. All right, y'all. So just remember, I absolutely love when you all have questions, when you all want to share your comments. Feel free to do that because I absolutely love to hear it. All right, so we only got 15, 20 minutes, so we're going to go ahead and get into it. We are talking about the invisible work that creates low performers. So let's backtrack a little bit and talk about where this came from. So earlier this week, I posted about two different employees. And these two different employees, essentially, you have one employee who does a lot of work behind the scenes, a lot of work that is hard to measure, and they're working on a project. And then you have another employee who speaks up in meetings and shares updates on what's going on behind the scenes. Now, none of this is by design. This is all based on preference, personality based, how employee A who works behind the scene works and how employee B works. And in this scenario that I shared, employee B, the person who speaks up at meetings, this is the person who is getting the recognition, is getting the praise. And then you have employee A, the person who is working behind the scenes trying to figure out, well, what the heck am I doing? What is off? Long story short, the supervisor talks to employee A, the person working behind the scenes, and says, "Hey, you gotta step up your game." And hence a low performer is born, or low engagement, disengagement. This is what we see. Now, one of the things that was really interesting about when I shared this post, I was not expecting the comments and the messages that followed, but this is something that is widespread. This is unfortunate because what we're seeing a misinterpretation of effort, a misinterpretation of value in the workplace. And what that means is people are trying, but what they are offering isn't translating as being valuable. Now, before we get too far into this, I think that it's important to set the tone for a couple of things. This is not about blaming leaders. This is not about blaming employee A or the employee who works behind the scenes. This isn't even about blaming employee B, the employee who is taking all of the credit. This is about systems, organizations, how we all work together. That is what this is about. All right. So now let's define what invisible work is in the workplace. Well, one of the things that when we think about invisible work is it is about defining problems before they escalate. This is someone who is fixing errors quietly. This is someone who maybe the work that they do is more qualitative. So maybe transferring knowledge, stabilizing relationships, carrying emotional labor, all of these different things. So more of the technical depth that others may present and put forward. Now, the reason why this work stays invisible is because of a few factors. One of them being similar to the example that I provided early on is that perhaps there is no self-promotion that's happening with this. It's preventative. And in being preventative, there is no drama, there is no theatrics, there is none of that is happening with it. Also, it is relational. And by it being relational, kind of how I mentioned that qualitative aspect, that's hard to measure. How is this person engaging and how is this person performing? And then also, we have it as being the system rewarding or the organization rewarding what it is familiar with or what it has proximity to or what it is consistently seeing. And that is why certain efforts go invisible. And one of the things to ask is that if this person was no longer doing the job, what would break or what would be affected? And that kind of helps us to see how individuals are putting in that effort. So now that we've kind of talked a little bit about, what does it mean to be have invisible work? How is a low performer manufactured? How are they created? How do they get this title as being a low performer? So, one of the first things that happens is that you have an employee who is initially they are engaging and they're doing a lot of great things. The hiccup is that the great things that they're doing isn't translating over to the organization as being helpful. And so what happens is that recognition follows visibility. And so they're not being recognized for the things that they're doing because the organization, as in your coworkers, your peers, your supervisors, executives, they aren't seeing the work that's being done as being useful. And so what happens is the employee starts to compare, which is what we talked about last week. The employee starts to compare. And in the process of comparing, they are trying to figure out who's getting thanked, who's getting promoted, who's getting protected, who is surviving layoffs. But in the process of doing that, it's all surface level. And so they are doing more of their contributions and efforts, but it's not translating still. So now the employee is saying, well, I'm still not getting thanks. So now what do I do from here? And in the process of doing that, now the supervisor comes or the manager comes and they say, hey, you're not making the mark. Where do we go from here? And now that employee becomes a little bit, maybe despondent, a little bit discouraged, and it's not working out, right? And so this is how a low performer happens. And when we look at it this way, we see that it's not a matter of someone just being lazy. It's not a matter of someone giving up. It's not a matter of someone not caring, but it is a repetitive what the system rewards, what the system acknowledges will get repeated, and what gets ignored will stop. I think of it like, is it Pavlov's? Oh, I should have worked on my pronunciation. Pavlov's dogs, right? When they kept doing something, when they kept pressing that button and getting that reward, they continue to do that. And it is the same thing. And that's not to say that we're dogs. So that's not the point. But the point is the action. The point is the behavior. And when we zoom out, we see that we all have a part to play. And I know that this is a lot to take in. This is a lot because in the past, from what I've seen in organizations, I see a lot of, the onus is all on leadership or the onus is all on the employee. And there are certain points where certain individuals will have more leverage depending on what that situation is, but it varies. And it can be really hard to see how we continue to allow something to happen or how we disallow something to happen by the part we play when we're in it. And the way to see how low performers are born or even high performers are born is to zoom out and look at it as a whole, look at what is getting rewarded. So I don't just want to share all this to you so that you are now overwhelmed and you're just like, whoa, what am I supposed to do with this, Lapora? So here we go. Let's talk a little bit more about what we can do with this. So, one of the first things is that to do is when what we are consistently rewarding, even unintentionally, that is what is going to remain. And so we have to make that shift. And one of the ways in order to make that shift is number one, asking the question is who else contributed to this? As I look through the comments and the messages that I received on that post on LinkedIn, that was one of the consensus is, how are we looking at who is contributing to one particular project? How are we looking at who is contributing to the effort to the team as a whole? How are we tracking this? So that is one way to go about it. So asking that question, who else is contributing? The other thing to ask is looking at, sorry, y'all, I got my questions right here, is looking at, second question is why did the performance drop? So why did the performance drop? And this is a question that is not just for leadership, but it's also for the employee who is perhaps feeling like they're overlooked and also the other employee. How are they feeling as that their performance has dropped? How are we looking at that situation? And the other question is what effort might we have misinterpreted? What effort might we have misinterpreted? And this one is really good because this one is not only for leaders, but it's also for the employee that's going through this feeling like they're a low performer and they're wondering, what am I doing that is being interpreted as being low performing? What am I doing that is potentially being interpreted as not being something that is useful, that is not contributing to the team? And as a leader, looking at what is this person potentially doing that we can't see or that they believe is adding value, but it's not quite adding value. And then being able to contribute or clarify that definition in a way where the leader and the team, everyone has an understanding of what it means to create value. All right, y'all. I know we covered a lot today, but I hope that this was something that was really useful to you as we're looking at low performers in the organization. The goal is to start viewing this differently, to not see it just as individuals who don't need additional attention, don't need additional focus and help, but maybe there is something larger than the performance that they're bringing into the workplace. What are the reasonings for that? What are we mislabel? What efforts are we mislabeling potentially? What are we overlooking in the workplace? I don't see any questions or any comments in the chat, but as always, I love to have the conversation. I love to continue the conversation because this is something that's really important to look a little bit closer to as we've been talking about it throughout this year, is that when contribution is misread long enough, that is when disengagement starts to show its face. When contribution is misread long enough, people are coming to work and we're creating efforts, but what is the environment supporting? What is the environment supporting? All right, y'all. So that is all that I have for today. Thank you all so much for tuning in. If you have any questions, if you have any comments, I hope that you will reach out and that we can connect. You can always visit me on LinkedIn at Lepora Lindsay. And additionally, you can feel free to visit my website at leporalindsay.com. There is an opportunity to connect there as well. All right. Just remember to tune in next Sunday at 5:30 p.m. And in the meantime, remember to stay adding value. Thanks, y'all. Have a good one. Bye.